Okay, and now we're going to do the final scene of Act 1, and that is scene 7. And this is the last scene before the fateful murder. So we'll need to turn to page 40 of your No Fear Shakespeare books, and above the scene, you'll want to write your summary. So I'll read mine out for you now, and feel free to copy it down. Macbeth questions the planned murder and decides he cannot kill Duncan, who has treated him kindly. Lady Macbeth questions his manhood and convinces him to go through with the plan and frame Duncan's guards.
If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence, and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the all, and the end all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poison chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding against the blast, or heaven's cherubim, horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself, and falls on the other. Enter Lady Macbeth. How now, what news?
He has almost supped. Why have you left the chamber?
Hath he asked for me?
Know you not he has?
We will proceed no further in this business. He hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon.
Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time such I account thy love. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage?
Prithee, peace! I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none.
What beast was then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man. And to become more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. Nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. But they have made themselves, and that their fitness now does unmake you. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love a babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from its boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this.
If we should fail?
We fail? But screw your courage to the sticking place, and we'll not fail. When Duncan is asleep, whereto the rather shall his day's hard journey soundly invite him, his 2 chamberlains will I with wine and wassail so convince that memory, the warden of the brain, shall be a fume and the receipt of reason, a limbeck only. In swinish sleep their drenched natures lie as in death. What cannot you and I perform upon the unguarded Duncan? What not upon his spongy officers, who shall bear the guilt of our great quell?
Bring forth men-children only, for thy undaunted metal should compose nothing but males. Will it not be received when we have marked with blood those sleepy two of his own chamber, and used their very daggers that they have done it?
Who dares receive it other, as we shall make our griefs and clamour roar upon his death?
I am settled, and bend up each corporal agent to this terrible feat. Away, and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what the false heart doth know.
Okay, so that's the end of scene 7. So we'll go back now, as we have done each time, to page 40, the start of the scene, and we'll work through some of the vocabulary and themes. So just like the last time, I would like you to look at the stage directions before we look at anything else. And the first two words are the same as the previous scene, boys and torches. So again, it's at night and we have that nice wooden medieval music playing. It says enter a sewer, which is a chief server, and drivers, servants with dishes and service over the stage. So there's this sort of hullabaloo happening on stage before this scene takes place to be emblematic of the sort of feast and the party, the battle's over that's going on. But then that all clears away and we're assuming it's in another room now outside of the party, and Macbeth enters and he's alone. And we find out later that Lady Macbeth's not happy with this. She says, "Why did you leave? It's making everybody a bit suspicious." We'll go through some of his language. So we'll start at line 3, when Macbeth says the assassination could trammel up the consequence. And trammel there, if you'd like to circle it, means entangle. And underneath that, in line 4, he says, with his surcease, success. So surcease there means death. And basically, as we continue down through to line 10 and 11, Macbeth is going on in a roundabout way to tell us that he does not think he'll get away with murdering Duncan. So it's very interesting here. There are multiple interpretations. One interpretation is that Macbeth has a conscience. So he has the ability to feel guilty for this plan, that he does have a love for Duncan and he doesn't want to do it. Another interpretation, and these two don't necessarily need to be exclusive, is that he's nervous he'll get caught. So that's an interesting thing to think about. So we're going to go down past the imagery where he talks about the ingredients of our poison chalice, and we'll look at line 12, and he says, to our own lips. And to me, that signifies that he's not so much worried about Duncan or caring about Duncan, but that he's worried about the harm the murder will bring to him. But then he goes and says he's here in double trust. So he's referring to Duncan, saying there are 2 reasons he shouldn't be murdered. He says that both are strong against the deed. So that means that they are both strong arguments. And as we continue down line 17 to 18, he says his faculties so meek. Faculties there mean power, meek meaning gentle and kind. So he's very kind in his power, his position of power. And it says, as we continue down, it says, so clear there meaning pure, so clear water, think pure, in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. So they're saying that Macbeth is saying that Duncan's virtues are so great that if he was murdered, so his taking off, that they would plead like angels, so trumpet-tongued. So it would be impossible to keep the murder of such a good man a secret. Taking off there meaning murder. And it continues on saying that heaven's cherubim, which are angels, will come on sightless couriers, so invisible steeds, like they'll ride on the wind, and blow the horrid deed in every eye. So in the shortened terms, Macbeth believes that heaven will intervene. If he kills the king, heaven will intervene and everyone will find out. And this indeed happens. And it also coincides with King James's belief. So if you forget who King James is, he is the king, the current king of England when this was written, who this play was performed for. And he even has a bit of a cameo in this play later on, which I will point out to you. And he believed 100% that kings were one step down from God, that they were higher than other humans, and that they had therefore more of a say. They couldn't be questioned. And it was a very different type of power than England had been used to, especially under Queen Elizabeth. She had to sort of temper her own power in order to be queen, to remain as queen, because female monarchs hadn't been very successful in the past. People usually disposed of them. And so she had to be very careful and very clever with how she presented herself. And so this change to James, who thought he was above everyone and couldn't be questioned, was controversial. And so again, we see Shakespeare really pandering to his audience here by having this idea that if you kill a king, heaven will intervene, because a king is heavenly. They're beyond human. And that continues down, and then we've got this idea of ambition coming back, and this idea of overleaping. So at first, Macbeth's ambition said he had to overleap Malcolm somehow, but now he's saying that that overleaping might lead to him to fall down. So that's the idea that bounding ambition that overjumps the saddle will land on the other side. Moving on to page 42. Lady Macbeth enters now, and she says he has almost supped. He there refers to Duncan. Supped means finished eating. And we can tell she's not happy. She's asking, why did you leave the chamber? We'll go down to Macbeth on line 33. He says, I have bought golden opinions. So he has gained golden opinions. That means bought means gained there. And again, he's talking about worn. So he's having enjoyed clothing. So it's that imagery of him enjoying his new roles, getting used to them. He hasn't had a chance to wear Thane of Cawdor and get used to it yet. And Lady Macbeth has none of it. So as we continue down to line 36, she says, was the hope drunk? And what that means is, did you only hope to be king because you were drunk? And now are you waking up hungover? So she says, and it wakes now to look so green and pale. So to look green and pale means hungover. And we continue down as she's berating him about how afraid were you big scaredy cat. To line 43, she says, which thou esteemest the ornament of life. And that is in reference, the ornament of life means the crown. And then she says, and lives a coward. So she is questioning his courage and his honor. So she's saying, are you going to live a coward? And then lastly, at the very bottom of her little tirade on line 49, she says, like the poor cat is the adage. So basically there is an adage, which is an old story about a cat that would not eat fish because she didn't want to wet her feet. And I believe, I haven't written it in the notes here, but I believe that means that the cat starved to death. So he's going to wait so long because he doesn't want to get his hands dirty that he's going to miss his opportunity, basically. And we'll continue down. Macbeth replies that. He says, please be quiet. And she responds, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? So she's twisting it. She's saying that you breaking the promise to me is evil, not murdering Duncan. And that's an important quote to highlight and record on your quotes page. What beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? On page 42. Moving on to page 44, and here I've written all my notes in a different color pen. So in every other part of the book I've used black, and in this section I've used, I don't know if the camera picks it up, red, because this is an important part that I referenced earlier. There are little clues that the witches didn't, in fact, plant the idea of murder in Macbeth's head, that they merely encouraged it, and that in fact Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were planning the murder earlier. That's why I wrote this in a different colour. It's a very obscure little part. There aren't going to be many essays that allow you to discuss this, but when there is, if you can pull out little obscure details like that, that's what differentiates your essay from someone who's paid less attention to the text. So pay attention. She says, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. So basically, if you were to take things a step further and murder Duncan, you would be more of a man. She says, nor time nor place did then adhere. Okay, so this is a very small line that packs quite a lot of information. So she's basically saying, back then, the time and place weren't right. So what does that mean? Back then, there wasn't the opportunity to kill Duncan. Does this mean that there was a time before where they tried, where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were planning to kill Duncan? Who knows? Some people say yes, some people say no. But I think that if you took this with the evidence that Macbeth instantly thought of murder as soon as he heard what the witches had to say, that you could argue that Macbeth wasn't just a wrong place, wrong time kind of man, but he was an intentional target, that the witches somehow knew his heart, that he planned to kill Duncan already, and they took advantage of that. Interesting. And then more revelation comes out. Lady Macbeth says, I have given suck, which means she has breastfed, which means that she has had a baby in this circumstance. And so that indicates that they most likely lost that baby or children in childhood because they don't currently have any children, which is an interesting choice because the real Macbeth did have a family in the real 11th century history, and it was actually Malcolm III, so the Malcolm that's mentioned in this play as Duncan's son, who killed all those children and that family. And so it's an interesting choice that Shakespeare erases that family to sort of rewrite history in this little bit of propaganda that he's created. And we'll continue. We'll go down to 60, line 60. When Macbeth asks if we should fail, and Lady Macbeth says, we fail. And she uses the really interesting line, screw your courage to the sticking place. And this is a beautiful line. It's somehow, for some reason, so easy to remember. I almost always get it used in every single essay, and there's nothing wrong with that. That just means that it's versatile. And it basically means that murder is courage, and that you should put it to the sticking place. You should hold on to it. And basically, being moral in this circumstance is weakness. And a sticking place is basically where a bow and arrow hits. Okay, so that's a sticking place. So it's part of the imagery. There's an interesting mention of chamberlains, which is guards. Just a little fun fact. Later on, Shakespeare's company, they were at one point called the Chamberlains, the Lord Chamberlains. And under King James, they changed their name to the King's Men, which is interesting. The word wassail underneath that means deep drinking. So Lady Macbeth is talking about her plan to get the guards very drunk. The word warden of the brain, that means guardian of the brain. So that's line 65. Line 66, a fume. Fume means fog or smoke. And then line 67, you've got limbeck, if you want to circle that, which means a cup which catches fumes. And then there's the idea of swinish sleep. So she's saying the guards will get drunk, and in addition to that, drugged from the wine she's going to give them, and they're going to sleep like pigs. As we continue down line 71, it says his spongy officers, so again referring to them being drunk, spongy meaning drunken. And then lastly, I would like you to highlight and write down the line and use their very daggers that they have done it. So that's an important part. They're going to use the guards' daggers to frame them. So it's really painting this murder as the opposite of valiant. So in real life, we remember Macbeth, the real Macbeth in the 11th century, killed Duncan on the battlefield. And it was a victorious, accepted, sanctioned killing. It wasn't this insidious secret murder that we see. And it was a very common way to dispose of a king and to make yourself king at the time. It wasn't this. It's the complete opposite to what's happening in the play. So lastly, I want you to highlight the very last two lines. Mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what false heart doth know. And here again, as well as the witches' oxymorons of fair is foul and battle lost and won, and both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's mention of night, where Macbeth says, stars hide your fires, and when Lady Macbeth says, come thick smoke and pall thee, or come thick night and pall thee in the dunner smoke of hell, we see yet another example of appearance hiding reality. So false face, the false expression must hide what the false heart does know. So here you've got currently 5 different quotes that you could use to write an essay on appearance hiding reality. So if I was to pose a question to you at the end of this act, how does Act 1 portray the theme of appearance hiding reality? You could use all of those 5 quotes to plan a 3-paragraph or 5-paragraph text response essay. And so if you would like to do that, or at least plan one and send me the notes on Teams, that would be an excellent idea. But in the meantime, make sure you fill in your activities in your booklet.